IELTS Listening Module, Strategies and Tips, Part 2. And now we are going to learn our specific strategies for the Section 1. As you remember, our Section 1 is going to be about conversations. And the first task we are going to review is completing a form. The most important thing to remember when you're completing a form is paying attention to the words before and after the gap. Make sure to listen for the name and address which appear before the gap. So for example, here we have an example below with a name and address. As you see, we have a name, Juan, gap, and John's. So in this case, as you can tell, we have to listen for the first name of John's. So for example, when you hear first name and then it will be followed by John's, you know that's information you need to write down. The next example we have address 154, 2, and gap. So whenever you hear 154, the following information you're going to write down in your gap. And remember that the order of the gaps in the form will follow the conversation. And now we're going to review how to complete a table in the Section 1. Remember, before you listen, you need to circle the keywords around the gaps. And then you need to listen to the conversation and complete the form below. In the IELTS exam, you'll be asked to write no more than 3 words and or a number for each answer. So this is your task, to read carefully and identify how many words you are allowed to write down. So as you see, we have a table below and you have a title that states the following: Sandington Hotel reservation form. You are given 5 numbers which are followed by the gaps that you have to fill out. For example, as you see, before number 1, you have 2 words, guest name. And then you have a gap and Wiggins. Wiggins, it's a last name. And when you are listening to your recording, you have to write down and identify what kind of first name goes before this last name. The second one is already done for you. For example, you have arrival date, then June 23rd. And the next one, it's number 2, you have to fill out is length of stay. So length of stay represents number. So you have to listen carefully for how many days a person who is trying to reserve a room is trying to stay there. Maybe it's 3 days, maybe it can be 5 days, 10 days. So you have to listen and identify this number. Then we have room type. So room type, it's like logically you can ask yourself, what kind of room types do hotels have? So think about that and be prepared to listen for this type of information. The next one we have is the room preferences. Room preferences, so here you have to be very careful because you have number 4 gap, but then you have also the word view. So that has to be word before the word view that you have to write down, and it has to make sense when you write this word down, and it has to be grammatically correct as well. So be very careful when you're listening for this information. And the last point we have, it's number 5, which is going to be credit card number. As you remember, we discussed previously about the numbers and different ways we can say the numbers. So you have to make sure you know all the different ways how numbers can be said, and you are listening carefully for these numbers. Important tips here to remember are not to write 4 words, because here in the IELTS test you are being asked to write only 3 words. You have to make sure you are using your pencil, then circling the keywords and reading and predicting what you are going to hear in your recordings. And now we're going to review how to complete a table in the listening test. The most important strategy here to keep in mind is circling the keywords and paraphrasing them. Also, you have to make sure when you are taking your notes, you write them down in a column for each speaker. This will help you to stay focused and not get confused. Also remember, paraphrasing will focus your attention on the subject of the conversation. Remember also that speakers might not use the exact same words in the conversation, so you should be able to hear some different words that have the same meaning. And as you see, we have an example here, and you have a question that states the following: which two activities is the guest interested in? And we have a list A through E, and we have a paraphrase words that you might hear in the listening recording. So for example, you have A, water sports. You might have a list A, water sports, but the speaker in the listening might say something like swimming, boating, water skiing. Also, you might have something like hikes, but the speaker might not mention the word hikes, but say walks and climbing. So you have to make sure you know how to hear these words with different words. And when you are given 30 seconds to prepare before listening, that's the thing you have to do. You have to try to paraphrase the answer choices you have and be ready to hear these ideas with different words.